Hello and welcome into the Wednesday, July 20th edition of the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano with Dave Morassutti. We're hosts here at Locked On Leafs. Matt Tkachuk could be on the move, Dave. Should the Leafs make a phone call and toss out a, hey, you up to Brad Treliving? We discuss that and more on today's edition of Locked On Leafs.
You're Locked On Maple Leafs, your daily podcast on the Toronto Maple Leafs. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello and welcome to the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano from TSN 1050 Toronto Radio, also known as Al's brother on TSN's Overdrive and TSN 1050's Leafs Lunch. Joining me, it's my co-host, Dave Morassutti from Sportsnet, also writer for the NHLPA. Locked On Leafs is a daily Maple Leaf-centric podcast, so be sure to subscribe for free wherever you get your podcasts from. You can also now catch us up on video platform via YouTube. Just hit up Locked On Leafs on YouTube and hit subscribe. Dave, I'm recording outdoors today. This is a new one. How does it look? It's kind of dark.
It's not too bad. The important thing is we see your face.
You can see my face. You can see the grill, which I don't know. I don't know if that's necessarily a good thing. Maybe you'd rather see a little bit of darkness instead of this ugly mug, but is what it is. Before we get into this Matt Tkachuk discussion, I was just watching the MLB All-Star game out here on my back patio, which is why I'm outdoors, and we just kind of started recording right afterward. And it got me thinking, like, there's a couple of things. Well, first and foremost, the MLB All-Star game, hands down to me, the best All-Star game out there in terms of the four major league sports. And I mean, it's because essentially you can go all out in these games and exacerbate your full skill level without being a dink. Essentially, like if you're back checking in an All-Star game in the NHL, you're going to get mocked and laughed at for back checking in an All-Star game. It's just going to happen. Whereas in baseball, it's like the truest form of what the game is, which I think is awesome. And it turns out to be a pretty solid game, and it was. But what I really appreciated about what we saw in today's broadcast, the Fox broadcast in particular, was all like the extracurricular type of stuff, like being mic'd up with all the players. And Alec Manoah stole the show, in my opinion. Came out there, tossed a one inning, but got three punchies today. Like, to me, that's the type of stuff that the NHL could definitely use going forward. Like, have some of these players mic'd up and have them talking during the actual game on the bench out there on the ice. I know they do it sometimes with the goaltenders, but why not do it with everybody? Like just a lot more often. They had Big Poppy, David Ortiz going onto the bench, into the dugout, interviewing guys. Have like Biz Nasty or O-Dog or something like that go down. I guess it'd be Biz Nasty because it's typically a sports thing, but like have someone go down there and or like Wit and do like a spit and chicklets type of thing and have them go down there and interview these players down on the bench. You know what I mean? Like just have something fun, interesting. I think there's some stuff that the NHL could definitely take from the MLB's playbook here in the All-Star game and implement it into their own.
Yeah, like the one thing the NHL and really no other league will be able to match up against is a home run derby. Like I am for many years, I would just watch the home run derby and I would just skip the All-Star game because
Yeah.
like the home run derby is just fun. But no, I think like when you have a guy like David Ortiz he has such a bubbly personality. He's funny. He's a superstar for like a legend of the game. Like that's such an easy draw. And it was kind of it's so easy to sell Big Poppy at the All-Star game. The
Right.
NHL needs to find like that equivalent to get down there and like and get them down. I mean the benches is tough, but like get them down there so that they're actually like a part of the thing, not doing it from like the broadcast booth or doing it from up in the stands. Like get them down where the action is. So it's even between the benches, like they have that ability to do that. Like I'm trying to think like who would be the guy. Would it be like
That's
PK
true.
Subban?
Well, that might be the player once he kind of retires. Like he might be the guy I was gonna say who has that type of flair and has that personality who could go down there. Like Kevin Bieksa did it a couple of years ago, and I thought he was funny, he was good. But to your point, it's not the star. It's not like a Charles Barkley, a Shaquille O'Neal who's down there. It's not a David Ortiz level of player. Where if maybe the problem is hockey, they got a lot of wet mop personalities amongst the stars of the game. So there's not a lot of, big time, former all stars or former stars and Hall of Famers who also are big time personalities. That's another issue, I suppose, that the NHL has. It's always been part of the game, but
Yeah.
hey, maybe that's changing, right? Maybe that's changing. We've seen a lot more vocalness out of players and from whether it's getting involved in certain initiatives or it's getting involved being vocal on social media. I think PK's kind of led the charge, and perhaps when he hangs it up and is all said and done, he could be that guy for ESPN to kind of go down on ice level and get those cool, funny interviews with the players.
Yeah, like it just it bring because it's supposed to be different from any normal game, right? How do you change it? Like the 3-on-3 was probably the best thing that they could have done to provide something different to that to the game. But yeah, they got it. You have to also try to add a little bit of just humor and just lighten up the situation a little bit and just add entertainment value because now everyone will be talking about Alek Manoah talking as he's getting ready to pitch him, and I think it was at John Schmaltz were talking about like the pitch selection, like that's awesome. And then he's like talking about the pitch, and then he's like down the middle, whoops, there, and it's okay, it worked in you.
You know what I realized today that I guess I didn't really realize? Like, I never thought about it, I suppose.
Mhm.
Man, do pitchers ever miss their spot a lot? You
It's
notice that? Like anytime the pitchers were like down and away, they'd be like up and in. It's like, dude, you missed like half of your pitches were complete opposite of what you said it was gonna be. Except the one that Schmaltz did tell him. He did say, down back foot. I guess it ended up going front foot, so he was, a little bit ahead of it. But I did notice that when they're telling exactly what they're throwing, and then you realize, that did not go up and in. That went down and away. He missed his spot. That happens a lot more often, I would assume, than I think we believe we just by watching the game. So that was kind of cool to get that insight to know that even the pros maybe sometimes get a little lucky. They're not as good as we think they are when it comes to putting the ball exactly where they want it. Although some guys are, and Alek Manoah is better than doing that than others. 3 punchies for him. That was quite phenomenal, and it just speaks to the amount of youth talent that's in the city of Toronto entirely. Right,
yeah.
like you have Manoah there, you had um, Vladdy there, you had Alejandro Kirk there, Jordan Romano, you had
Exactly.
Santiago Espinal. Like all these guys are
First
under.
Winger would have been there too if he wasn't dealing with an injury.
He would have been there as well, but I was speaking to, like, the youth guys, right? So,
Oh
like,
yeah,
they're all under 30 years old and, just either approaching or not even at their prime yet,
right.
and it's you look at the Raptors, you've got Pascal Siakam, you've got Van Vliet, Scotty Barnes, OG, Gary Trent, like, got a lot of really talented players, and then obviously in Toronto, where you've got Matthews and Marner, 2 top tier. I mean, they were first team All-Star center, first team All-Star right winger. Right? It's just so much talent in the city of Toronto. It's good to be a Toronto sports fan right now, which is nice because there's been a lot of down years in the last, well, even recent
Yeah.
past. So it's nice to be able to celebrate that some of the best in the game play in the city of Toronto, and we get to watch them and root them on and cheer for them on a daily basis. It is nice to see. All right. Before we get into the Matt Tkachuk situation and whether or not we should build a case for whether they should or should not pick up the phone and call Brad Tree Living, I want to tell you guys about one of today's show sponsors, and that's betonline.net. It's the fastest and easiest way to check in on all your betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, and even golf. BetOnline continues to be the top online resource for all your sport wagering information, from live in-game betting, scores, and podcasts. They have you covered. Head to betonline.net today or use your mobile device to learn more about the action happening. BetOnline, it's where the game starts. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast. I'm Mike DiStefano. Got Dave Morassutti with me here. We bring you Leafs and hockey coverage each and every day, even throughout the offseason. So if you haven't already, go ahead and subscribe, whether it's via audio or video platform on YouTube. Subscribe to us for that daily hockey fix, even through the offseason. And the offseason's a couple of weeks in now, I would say. And there's still not, the news hasn't completely dried up because now Calgary has given us a second big topic of conversation. First, it was Johnny Gaudreau leaving the city of Calgary for the Columbus Blue Jackets. And now everyone kind of turned their eyes over to Matt Tkachuk, and doesn't sound like Matt Tkachuk wants to be there long term either. What's your kind of read on this entire situation?
We've kind of heard like when the first contract between the Flames and Kachuk was going down, like they tried to get him into a long-term deal and he had no desire to sign one. And then with the Johnny Gaudreau situation, it kind of just amplified the Kachuk thing. It was almost like, all right, this kind of got passed over a little bit because Gaudreau was like the priority in Calgary, but now it's just like there's no like a lot, and Eric Francis, the big one covering the Flames, is pretty much saying like prepare for Kachuk's departure. He's almost like preparing the goodbye like column right now. It's really strange how this is kind of all accelerated. And I think it's just a realization that you don't want to lose the guy for nothing. And it's similar to the situation I think the Jets are facing with Pierre-Luc Dubois, a player that didn't ask to go to Winnipeg. He wanted out of Columbus, and Winnipeg was just his best option to get out of there. I don't know what Kachuk's feeling was about Calgary. I don't think he's ever really said he never wanted to be there. But, guys also, I think now more so than ever, are trying to figure out ways to go to places that they want to be. Matthew Tkachuk, I think a good part of him probably wants to be in St. Louis. Or maybe it's just a better situation of where he is currently. I think another one, some people are mentioning the Daryl Sutter effect might also be something that people are aren't thinking enough about. Like, do you think Johnny Gaudreau, he had his best career with career year with Daryl Sutter, but is that someone you want to play with for long term? Like, he's not exactly a coach that's easy to play for. So I don't know. It's really tough to say. Really, I don't think it's money for Calgary because Calgary was offering Gaudreau more money to stay there, and he didn't want it. So I think it could just be preference for a lot of these players, and it's unfortunate for a city like Calgary. It's a great fan base. It's a pretty decent place to live, but for a lot of these guys, especially the American ones, it's not usual. They prefer being closer to home, what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a lot of good points there. I don't think it necessarily is the fact that Calgary isn't trying to pony up the money it'll take to sign him. I think he's just wants to go elsewhere. It's very similar to the Pierre-Luc Dubois situation, like you said, where it's look, I'm a year away from free agency. You're taking me to club elected arbitration. I'll take the 1 year deal and then I'll be a free agent in a year. Or you could trade me this summer. And if you want to trade me to a team that I'm interested in going in and signing long term, you allow me to kind of see what's out there. You could probably get more for me because then I can also sign an extension with that team as well, and then you could get more assets out of it. So it's an interesting predicament that Calgary is in right now. Like they're a team that like Stanley Cup caliber this season. Like they truly were. They won the division. I thought that they were fantastic. I mean, Matt Tkachuk had 104 points this year, 42 goal season. Like these no slouch. Like this is a top line, front line, player. Like he drives the bus for this team along with Johnny Gaudreau. And I mean, with Gaudreau gone and now potentially Matt Tkachuk, it's going to be a scary situation. Like the Flames, after a 1 year really of having a window of potentially winning, might already have to go into a retool, rebuild type of thing if this in fact does come to fruition and Matt Tkachuk finds his way out of Calgary. I mean, they could probably get a decent, pretty penny to whoever he trades him to, but ultimately it's going to be interesting to see the fallout, I guess, in Calgary if things happen. Like, do they then try and move on from Lindholm and like completely strip it down? Does Markstrom become available? Like, it gets real interesting with them. But before we get kind of wild and get into the whole what do the Flames do portion of this, we got to chat a little bit about whether or not this is something that you think Kyle Dubas should be in on, and should Kyle Dubas be making a push to bring in a Matthew Tkachuk if he is indeed available? Whether or not he'd want to come to Toronto, I'm not too sure. I think there's a possibility. I mean, it's a Stanley Cup caliber team. I think that he's got some friendships with Mitch Marner from Junior, grew up with Austin Matthews in the American development system. So he's got some ties with a couple of the star players here in Toronto. So there could be some interest for Matt Tkachuk if Toronto could get it done. But if you were Kyle Dubas, is this something that you'd be inquiring on, or are you not really all that interested in bringing in Matt Tkachuk and thinking that this could just be, he's hoping to get to St. Louis at some point and not worth it for just a 1 year rental in a way?
Yeah, well, I think that's the big thing right there is what's Matthew Kachuk's desire? Is his desire just for a different team to play for, or is it to go home? So that's going to impact what you do, but you got to be in on that conversation regardless if you're Kyle Dubas. Like, this is a guy that I think would fit a big need for this Leafs team. Um, but the problem is, and it's the same thing I always see with a guy that's available. All right, let's just throw William Nylander into the deal. Do you really think that Calgary is just going to say, "Yeah, we'll take William Nylander"? Like, they
Hey, go
could.
home, Willie. Go home. Born in Calgary, Alberta. Go home, pal. Go home. Just go
By,
home. You
by the
know?
way, you're also going to go play for Daryl Sutter, who is going to love you as a coach.
Yeah, well,
I, I just I I just think that, yeah, it would take a lot to get that deal done, but
yeah.
he's a player that you would. I mean, he had 100 point. He had what 104 points this year.
104 points, 42 goal season.
Like, he's a good player. Like, this
And the
isn't.
dude's a pain in the ass as well, which is
Yeah,
something that the Maple Leafs do not have. He's got fire in his belly, something the Leafs desperately need. Like, honestly, Matthew Tkachuk is the missing ingredient for the Toronto Maple Leafs. Like, he really is. It's just a matter of can you afford it? And do you have the pieces to get it done? I think that's the question that if you're Toronto, and that's why you got to pick up the phone. If you're Kyle Dubas, you have to at least inquire and ask. I mean, you have to, no? Like,
like
you
I
gotta at
don't
least
like.
that's your job to know what's going on around the league, and if a player of the caliber of Matt Tkachuk is available, and if you might be able to bring him in, and if you have the correct package that you'd be willing to part with, you got to pull the trigger, bringing in a player like that.
Yeah, you can't pass if you can't pass up on any opportunity like that because a player like Matthew Tkachuk does not get on the market very often.
No,
Rarely, almost like never, right? So that's where you just have to. You're picking at a carcass of what Calgary is now kind of just like. Well, yeah, we're not going to trade Matthew Tkachuk, and then GM's gonna be like, all right, just let it, then
we'll wait a year.
we'll wait for to hit the open market. And that's I've heard like that's what Montreal's doing with potentially with Winnipeg and Dubois, and how much truth to that there is, we'll see. But like,
Yeah.
what's the incentive for a team to for Calgary is going to go? Oh, we want your top player, top prospect, and like a couple of first round picks, and the team's just like, well, yeah, we're just gonna wait. Like, it's like what's like Calgary is in such a terrible situation right now. It's not their fault.
Well,
You only put the fault in that they didn't
it's
get him
not
signed
like
to the
he's
farm.
not an amazing asset, though. I mean,
No.
there is definitely incentive to bringing in Matthew Tkachuk this season, as
Yeah.
opposed to waiting and opening up the
Oh
pool
yeah.
to a whole bunch of other players. Like if you're Toronto, I think you would much rather try and go get him now and bring him into your squad and try and hammer out a long-term deal with this guy than press your luck in free agency. So I
Oh
think
no,
there is
that
value
extra
for
year to
Calgary in that
negotiate is
regard.
huge.
What's that?
That extra year to negotiate is massive. Like he's only going to
Right.
cost $7 million on the cap this year.
No, 9.
Oh,
His
oh wait,
total salary was 9 million. So
sorry,
he's
I meant his cap hit is 7.
his cap hit was 7 this season, but his at club elected
Right, his
arbitration going to
arbitration,
be a $9 million cap hit minimum,
which is
unless he, is able to discuss and get himself some sort of long term deal at a lower cap hit. But that would take
I
making a deal, right?
I
And
don't,
you
but
can't negotiate that until, well, I guess technically you could negotiate it if he's
before
allowed to speak to other
arbitration.
teams, right? But you got to get that assurance before you make that trade, I guess, for giving up top end pieces.
Well, is this a case where Calgary tries to do a sign and trade?
Um, yeah, like in a way, and like almost like a
Like,
Mark Stone style sign and
yeah,
trade, where it wasn't technically a sign and trade, but you allow the team to negotiate the contract and then you trade it and it's signed right away, like that
yeah.
type of sign, not like NBA style, but yeah.
No, no,
I,
no. Like
yeah, I think absolutely. Like you allow him to talk to teams and you figure out who's gonna offer up, which deal do you like, and then where of those contracts or of those places
mhm,
that you would like to go to, which of them gives us the biggest haul in return?
yeah,
Absolutely. If I'm Calgary, I'm giving them all the permission in the world to go and speak to teams because you can't let them walk. You can't let Johnny walk this summer and then Kachuk walk next summer. Can't happen. So if you know and you pretty much have an inkling that Matthew Tkachuk has no interest in being in Calgary next season, you got to trade him this summer. You got to do it. You just have to. You got to bite the bullet. And if that means your organization's going in a bit of a different direction than you had intended on, I guess, back in December, so be it. Life comes at you fast, pal. Life comes at you fast. And I think that Toronto should be one of the teams would that should probably call and see what it would take. So why don't we go through it, Dave? Why don't we discuss maybe what it would take to land a player of the caliber of a Matthew Tkachuk? And we'll do that on the other side. Welcome back into the Locked On Leafs podcast, your one-stop shop for all things Leafs. I'm your host, Mike DiStefano. Got Dave Morassutti with me. We are your hosts here at the Locked On Leafs podcast. Be sure to subscribe wherever you get your podcast from. We're discussing Matthew Tkachuk and what it would take for the Maple Leafs to bring Tkachuk to Toronto. Because, Dave, I think he's the missing ingredient. Like, legitimately, you add a guy like Kachuk with his feistiness, his aggression, his goal scoring prowess. You add that injected into this team's top six. Now you got something. You have something if you're here in Toronto. But what would it take? Like, what would you have to subtract, I guess, to get it done? So I'm curious what you think. Like, if there are any trade packages that stick out to you that you think it would take to pry Matthew Tkachuk away from Calgary?
well, you're already thinking about the dollar sign of like cap hit wise. You got to make the salaries work, right? So,
Yeah.
are you piecing together multiple options? Are you going with the guy with a higher salary and another salary just to kind of make it work? Like, let's say the contract is, as you said, it's got to be minimum $9 million, right? That's the starting point. So, like, I'm gonna say his name. I don't think that's gonna be incentive enough for Calgary. You think I'm gonna say Mitch Marner, but it's not Mitch Marner.
Oh, okay.
Like, I
Because
don't.
I thought about that, but go ahead with your
I
name.
did. I know, no, but like
We'll
he.
talk about Marner in a sec, but you say who you were going to say.
Well, it's like everyone's gonna say William Nylander. That's gonna be probably where Toronto maybe starts
Yeah.
because like he's got other than Marner, Tavares, and Matthews, like that's the only other salary that fits in that threshold. I don't see Morgan Riley being the one that's going to get thrown into a deal like that. He has a no movement clause, so he also has a chance to say no, sir, on that. Um, I mean, I'm like because you have to think also age wise too. Nylander's 26, so he's not. He can at least go to a team and at least Calgary's not losing too much in terms of production. It's not Matthew Tkachuk, but it's at least something.
And you have him for an extra season, right? Like
Yeah.
Nylander signed for 2 years, where you lose Tkachuk after this season. So you're getting an extra year out of an elite, top 6 winger.
Yeah. So then again, I'm gonna put Kerfoot in there because that's 3.5 million there as well. So you're over $10 million in cap flexibility there. So that would help with the money, and then you're looking into prospects, right? Like, what does Calgary want?
First round pick. They definitely are
Oh,
going to want a first round pick.
yeah, first they might want 2 first round picks because I mean, if you're giving
You
William,
get Nylander though. Like Nylander's in this deal. Like let's not forget. Like Nylander's not a
no,
schluck.
he's not a
You know what I
he's not a
mean? I don't
throwaway.
think you could go Nylander and then demand like multiple first round
Well,
picks.
it's either you ask for multiple picks or you ask for prospects, right? You kind of I would say a first round pick for sure if you're gonna
Probably
pick.
if you can get Kachuk to sign an extension, um, in and around like maybe like an 8x8 type extension for Matthew Tkachuk. Look at us. We've been complaining for years about the amount of money allotted to the forwards, and now we're already looking to add another 1.1 million to the forward group by slotting in Kachuk for Nylander. But hey, it's worth it when you're getting that type of player who's got those attributes. Um,
Now, what money would you kind of say for Matthew Tkachuk, like to make it almost feel
I,
like not worth it for the Leafs or
well,
less able?
if he's looking for what he, I mean,
He's
like
got
Goudreau got 9.5, right?
9.75.
Do you think 9.75? Do you think Kachuk is worth as much as Goudreau?
That's a good question. Like he's close, but he's not. The thing is, like Gaudreau had the extra, like he had the leverage of being a free agent, and Columbus pretty much going in and saying, "All right, what is it going to take?" And he's probably took a little bit more money to go to Columbus because they had the better offer than New Jersey. So,
Actually, he left money on the table in Calgary. Remember?
well, he left, but like that's washed because he didn't want to be there anyways. It
Right.
was almost like Calgary could have offered him a max contract, and he would have said no to that probably, right?
Probably, potentially.
Like he
But
said he was
yeah,
close to a deal with New Jersey.
yeah, I saw that. I
And
did see that. That if it weren't for a last minute phone call, he was signing with New Jersey.
oh my god.
And Columbus called. Like, yep, that's the place I want to go to. Absolutely. But anyway, we're done with Johnny Gaudreau.
Yeah,
Yeah,
but like I would
that's
say
9.
I wouldn't
Like
go over
eight,
9.5.
yeah, between like 8 and 9 probably is what it would
Yeah.
probably take for Kachuk on like a long term deal.
Mhm.
Um, the problem is he probably wants more. Like he's
He
looking
will
for
want
10 sheets, I would say. So it really does depend on whether or not you can try and hammer out a deal. Like if you can get a sign and trade, then yeah, I'd be willing to give up Nylander and a first round pick, and then Kerfoot. I would be willing to give that up if you can get an extension along, done with this.
more.
But if you're not getting an extension, you're just basically getting him for a 1 year rental, and he said, "I'm going to test the market afterwards, but I'll give you one hell of a season." I don't know if I'm willing to go Nylander, Kerfoot, and a first on that. I'll be
Mhm.
honest with you. I'd rather go more of a prospect route where there's, lottery. Then you get into a situation where you're like, oh, Nylander has to be in this
Yeah.
trade. And the question is, are you willing to make that deal if you don't? It's almost similar actually to like with the Raptors. A big issue with Kevin Durant that a lot of people have is don't know if there's loyalty there. And if he decides he wants out of Toronto in 2 or 3 years, I know he's under contract for 4 years, but if he wants out in a year or two potentially, you don't want to give up Scotty Barnes in that type of deal. And it's similar with Kachuk. If he wants out after next year and he's going to explore free agency and most likely go down to the States, if that is his prerogative, if that's his main objective, then do you really want to give up William Nylander and a first round pick for one season of Matt Tkachuk? I don't know if you really want to do that. So that's kind of the game that I think Toronto needs to play here. If
Yeah.
they bring him in, they have to be able to sign him to a long term extension.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much the case. Unless, yeah, there has to be some sort of condition on if there is a draft pick, It has to be conditional on. But I think a deal like this, you're getting that contract stuff. You're having that discussion well before you're pulling the trigger on the trade.
Yes,
So
absolutely. Like that's part of the trade discussion is
yeah,
hammering out an extension, right?
yeah.
Like that's it. I doubt Matthew Tkachuk is coming to Toronto. He could go elsewhere that have the cap space, like some other teams that have cap
Mm.
space that they could just bring on a Tkachuk and pay him the $9 million this season. But Toronto clearly can't without moving out salary, and they really aren't able to do that unless they move out Nylander. I mean, they could move like Muzzin, Kerfoot, and like spare parts to make the money work technically. But why the hell would Calgary want that, right? Like,
No.
there's also needs to make sense on Calgary's angle as well, right? It's not just an NHL video game where you put on all these players to match salary and then you just give up a whole bunch of first round picks and prospects. That's not how the real world works, ladies and gentlemen. But it's going to be an interesting, discussion that I think is going to be had in Maple Leafs front office of whether or not this is something that they want to try and explore, and if Matthew Tkachuk has interest. Like I said, has a great friendship with Austin Matthews, dating to back when they were kids. Has a good friendship with Mitch Marner. They went, they played together for the London Knights in junior. So there's a connection there with those superstars. And could you imagine like a Kachuk Matthews Marner line? Oh, oh my God, David, this thing would
But
be
Mike, I thought
unbelievable.
you didn't want to move Michael Bunting off the top line.
Well, I don't want to move Michael Bunting off the top line for Alex freaking Kerfoot, but if it's Matthew Tkachuk, get out of here.
It's fine.
Ciao. Arrivederci.
No, well, not just
Sorry.
we'll help JT.
Right? Go and dig in the corners for John Tavares. Exactly. They could use a Michael Bunting type of player on that line anyways. Or you could even just put JT with Kachuk if you really want. Spread out the scoring a little bit. You could also do that. That could be something that
Could
maybe
move Marner with JT.
yeah, potentially. You could do a whole bunch of different things. But the point is Kachuk is an outstanding talent. I would be picking up the phone, seeing what it would take, not only from the Flames, what they would want, but also calling Kachuk's agent and saying, what's an extension look like if he comes to Toronto? What's the number we'd be dealing with? Because if we can't stomach it, we're not pulling any type of trigger on any type of deal with Kachuk. So that's my stance on it.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is all hypothetical. You can get very excited about a Matthew Tkachuk. I look,
Yes, I think there's a 4% chance that Matthew Tkachuk is a Maple Leaf next
yeah,
season, just to make that clear.
yeah, like
Maybe 3%.
we would like to see it. It would be great content for us. It would be a great addition to the Leafs. But these sort of situations, it's almost like the player has to kind of facilitate it a little bit too,
Yeah.
right? That's usually how these all usually go down.
Well, like on that aspect, would Kachuk be willing to take not even a pay cut, but like 8x8 would be considered probably an underpayment for what Kachuk can bring you.
Mhm.
But I mean, Matthew Tkachuk is not a guy who needs a boatload of money. Like his father played in the NHL. 8x8, that's $64 million. That's still a lot of money that he can make over the next 8 seasons. And that would fit much nicer into the Maple Leafs cap structure and would be able to work. And because you're offering up a chance to play in the pinnacle of hockey in Toronto, a chance to potentially win multiple Stanley Cups alongside two buddies of yours from your childhood in Mitch Marner and Austin Matthews. It's a pretty good sell job for Matthew Tkachuk if he's willing to leave a little bit. And if Tkachuk leaves a little bit on the table, maybe you could get Matthews to leave a little bit on the table next time his deal comes around. Maybe even Mitch Marner could leave just a hair next time it comes around. You know what I mean? Like if it starts here with Tkachuk and they want to try and keep the band together, if they have that success, maybe this is the start of something new in Toronto where we could see guys start to not get full pop and full term and everything that they've all wanted over the last couple of seasons out of Kyle Dubas. Maybe they could start with Matthew Tkachuk. Again, 3% chance of this happening. But a man can wish,
I'll
right?
go
A man,
2% just because his brother got 8.2, I think, per season.
oh
And so,
yeah, he'd want more than his brother, or
yeah.
at least the same. At
God
minimum
damn it,
the same.
Ottawa.
Imagine,
Overpaying Brady.
Match Brady. Brady's a captain. He's a captain, right? That's worth something. So maybe just match what Brady got in Ottawa.
How about this? We'll give you
Oh,
exactly $1 more so you can say you earn more than your
yeah,
brother.
$1 more,
Yeah, it'd be hilarious at every family gathering.
right?
You know,
Right? Would you get paid $1 more than you? Oh, thanks, thanks. Hey man,
that's not
plus
gonna pay more in signing bonuses.
for
Just
oh for sure you get signing bonuses, but also I mean the endorsements you can get in Toronto, you make a lot more money than he'll make
oh
in
yeah.
endorsements in Ottawa. I'll tell you that for free. So it's 3% isn't zero. We're
As it
saying there's a
Jim
chance.
Carrey would always say. See,
Yep.
tongue, there's a chance.
What? Justin Trudeau?
Oh
You
god.
didn't laugh nearly
Yeah,
as
no, I got that
that
joke.
was way come on, that was pretty good.
Eh, it's
What do you
okay.
mean, that haircut totally makes him look like, Jim Carrey's character in Dumb and Dumber. 1000%. It's hilarious.
Yeah,
It's
it's kind of ironic too, in a lot of ways.
I agree with you there, but this isn't a political podcast. It's a Leafs podcast, and why don't we leave it there, pal? Good
Yep.
chat, good discussion. We'll see what comes of it. See if anyone can swing a deal. Like you said, who was it? Eric? And no, who?
Eric Francis.
Yeah, Eric Francis. Out of he's out of Calgary, right?
Yep.
Calgary Sports of Calgary came out and said that he expects a possible Matthew Tkachuk trade to be wrapped up within the next week. So
I don't know if that's just
we'll see.
him predicting that or if that's just someone within the Flames saying this is gonna get done soon because it has to.
Well, I
Arbitration
imagine,
thing too
well,
also.
he's decently plugged in. I would think that he's
Yeah.
not
Oh
going
yeah.
with that without somebody telling him, "Hey, there could be something coming down the pipe here. Could be coming." So we'll see. We'll see what happens there. Uh, Fun discussion, David. Fun discussion. But that'll do it for us here today on the podcast. I'd like to thank you all for listening and supporting the show. You can subscribe to Locked On Leafs podcast on all podcast platforms and receive daily Leafs content. Follow myself on Twitter at Mickey_Canuck, at Dave Morassutti as well, and follow the show at Locked On Leafs. Leave a comment down below what you think about the whole Leafs, whether or not they should trade for Matthew Matthew Tkachuk. Would you be willing to do it if he's not willing to commit, or would you need to have the commitment in the long term? And what's your package? Let us know the package down below that you give up to bring in a Matthew Tkachuk. All right, we'll be back with another episode for you guys tomorrow. But until then, keep it locked right here on Locked On Leafs.